Pretend we're still together. Just for tonight. She whispered it at the reception, the woman who broke my heart 4 years ago, and I said yes before my brain caught up with my mouth, because you don't tell the girl you never got over no in the middle of a wedding. It wasn't until an hour in, when the DJ played the song we danced to on our first date, that I felt the first cold prickle at the back of my neck and thought, wait, how did they know that song? That question was the loose thread. By the end of the night I'd pulled it, and the whole evening had come unraveled into something I never saw coming. I'm Ethan Ward. I'm 36, a landscape architect, which is a fancy way of saying I design the outsides of other people's lives, the courtyards they marry in, the backyards where their kids grow up, the gardens they'll sit in when they're old. I'm good at it. I can look at a bare, muddy, hopeless lot and see, fully formed, the thing it could become in 5 years. The way afternoon light will fall through a tree that isn't planted yet. The path people's feet will wear before anyone's walked it. It's a strange gift, seeing potential in dirt. And the joke of my life, the one I didn't find funny until later that night, is that I could do it for anybody's property but my own. My own life I'd let go to weeds, on purpose, and kept telling myself I liked it that way. The wedding was Marcus and Dana's. Marcus had been my closest friend since our second year of college, and Dana had come into our circle a few years back and stitched herself into it so completely you couldn't remember the shape of the group before her. It was a good wedding, a restored barn out in the Pennsylvania countryside, string lights crisscrossing the rafters, wildflowers crammed into mason jars, the whole warm, imperfect thing that can make even a man like me believe in it a little. I almost hadn't come. That's worth saying up front. The invitation had sat propped on my kitchen counter for 2 months, while I drafted 3 separate excuses. Because I knew the way you know these things in your gut, before your brain agrees that Claire would be there. Claire Donovan, the woman who whispered in my ear. Let me tell you about her, and about the 4 gray years I built after her, because none of the rest lands without it. We met when we were 29 at a plant nursery, an actual nursery, which I've always found funny for 2 people whose whole thing turned out to be about growing something and then failing to keep it alive. I was there buying Japanese maples for a client with more money than patience. Claire was buying a fig tree she had no business buying, for an apartment she mentioned had north-facing windows, and I couldn't help myself. I told her the tree would be dead by February. She turned around with this dry, unimpressed who asked you look, and said, "Mind your own trees." And that was it. I was gone, right there between the perennials and the bags of mulch, a grown man leveled by a stranger defending a doomed fig tree. I talked her into a hardier variety that might survive her windows, carried it to her car, asked for her number, and made her work to give it to me. By the time we hit the parking lot, my whole life had quietly changed direction without asking my permission. We were together 3 years, and I'll say plainly they were the best 3 years I've had, because pretending otherwise to make this story easier would be a lie. And I'm done lying about Claire. She was private in a way that took me the better part of a year to earn past. She kept her deepest things behind a wall, and getting invited in felt like being handed something rare. She was funny in a quiet, sideways way that snuck up on you an hour later. And she was a planner. God, she was a planner. Trips mapped down to the hour. Birthday surprises she'd been assembling for months. She had this way of paying attention to what you loved and then engineering it into your life so it arrived feeling like luck instead of labor. I used to tease her that she couldn't let a good thing just happen. She had to architect it in secret. She'd say, "Every time, good things don't just happen, Ethan. Somebody builds them and doesn't tell you." I laughed it off back then. I didn't understand how completely she meant it. I would, by the end of that wedding. And then, 4 years ago, she ended it. No affair, no screaming, no thrown dishes, no villain I could organize my grief around. That was the part that made it impossible to set down. One winter she went quieter than her usual private quiet. A different quality of quiet, like a house with the heat shut off. Then one night she sat me down at our own kitchen table and told me, in a careful voice she'd clearly rehearsed, that she thought we should end it. That she cared about me too much to keep me tethered to someone who couldn't be sure. That I deserved somebody certain, and she wasn't, and she was sorry. I asked what had changed. She couldn't tell me. or wouldn't. She cried, which she almost never did, and left, and within 2 months she'd taken a job in another city. And that was that. 3 years of my life ended in one conversation whose bottom I never reached. Here's what I did with it, and it isn't flattering, so I'll say it straight. I decided it was me. I took her leaving as proof of a thing I'd half believed about myself since I was a kid, that I was fine to have around, but not enough to actually stay for. Pleasant company. Easy to like. Easy, eventually, to outgrow. And once a man decides that about himself, he does the quietest, most cowardly thing there is. He makes his life smaller so it can't happen again. I stopped dating, not with any drama, just by never quite trying, letting every possibility die of neglect. I buried myself in work, designing gorgeous outdoor spaces for other people's happy lives, and let my own apartment stay half-furnished, boxes I never unpacked, a balcony where I never planted a thing. I saw my friends less. I got very good at leaving early, the guy who slips out before the cake, before the dancing, before anyone can ask how he's really doing. I built a life with no room in it for anyone to disappoint, and called it peace, and it was actually just a slow retreat with the lights turned down. 4 years of that. That was the man Claire Donovan leaned over and whispered to at Marcus and Dana's reception. So when she found me, I was at the edge of the dance floor doing my usual quiet arithmetic on how soon I could disappear without being rude, and slid up beside me smelling exactly like she used to, and said those words low and close, "Pretend we're still together." Just for tonight, every sensible part of me should have stopped and asked why. Instead, some part of me that had been asleep 4 years just said yes, immediately, because even a counterfeit hour of belonging to Claire felt better than another real hour of belonging to no one. "Okay," I said. "But why? It's complicated. My family's here, some of them, on Dana's side, and they always ask, every single time." And she glanced away with a small, embarrassed grimace. "Perfectly done. I don't want to be the sad single cousin all night. A few hours. Please." It was a completely believable reason. That's the thing I'd keep circling back to, how good it was, how precisely built to be exactly the kind of thing I'd swallow whole. So we pretended. And I won't lie about how it felt, because it felt like walking into a house you used to live in and finding all your furniture still there, still arranged the way you left it. We fell into the old rhythm so fast it frightened me. The private jokes, still loaded. The way she'd press 2 fingers to my wrist when someone said something she found funny and didn't want to laugh at out loud. The way I automatically drifted to the bar and came back with the drink she liked without either of us saying a word. Her aunt came over, glowing, grabbed both our hands and said, "Oh, you two, I always said. Didn't I always say?" And Claire squeezed my arm and laughed, and I felt something turn over in my chest that I'd spent 4 years insisting I'd buried. And then the DJ played the song. Here's the thing, it wasn't a wedding song. That's what snagged me. Not a slow standard, not a floor filler, not anything a DJ pulls off a wedding playlist. It was a specific, half-obscure track that had been playing low in the background of the bar on our very first date. The one we'd later claimed as ours the way couples do, assigning meaning to an accident. Nobody plays that song at a reception. There is no version of a normal night where that song comes on. And I stood there with Claire's hand warm on my arm and felt that cold prickle climb the back of my neck, and I turned to look at her, and she was very deliberately watching the dance floor and not me. "Claire," I said, "how does Marcus and Dana's DJ know that song?" "What song?" "You know exactly what song." She smiled, eyes on the dancers. "It's a good song. Lots of people like it." I let it go. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that 4 years of missing a person will make you hunt for meaning in a coincidence, will make you a fool for any little sign. But I was paying attention now, and the trouble with a man like me is that once I start seeing the hidden structure under a thing, I can't stop. Because reading the invisible architecture of a space is literally what I do for a living. And the night, it turned out, was built, board by board. The seat came next. When we drifted to the tables for dinner, there was my place card, my name, in the same careful calligraphy as everyone else's set right next to Claire's. I know how seating charts work, I've been to enough of these. I'd RSVP'd late, and alone, and a late single male guest does not simply happen to land beside a specific single female guest at a wedding this organized. Somebody put my name there. On purpose, right next to hers. The wine came third. When the servers poured for our table, it wasn't the house red a caterer buys by the case, it was a specific Spanish Rioja, a real bottle. And I knew it the instant I smelled it, because it was the wine we'd shared on our first anniversary at a tiny place downtown that had closed its doors 3 years ago. I hadn't tasted it since. Couldn't. I stared at the bottle, then at Claire, and she lifted her glass, took a small sip, and said, mild as anything, "Oh, this is nice," as though she'd never had it before in her life, and I knew, with total certainty, that she was lying to my face and enjoying how badly she was doing it. Then the reading came back to me. During the ceremony, before any of this had started to add up, Dana's sister had stood and read a passage, and it had snagged some hook in me even then without my understanding why. Now, with the pieces sliding into place, it landed. It was from a book, a specific novel, one I had given Claire when we were 29, barely 3 weeks in, with a single line underlined in pencil, a line I'd been too shy to say to her face, so I'd let the book say it for me and prayed she'd notice. The reading at my best friend's wedding had been lifted, word for word, from the book I gave Claire Donovan in the first month I knew her. I set my fork down. And then, during the toasts, I caught the last piece, not a planted object, a tell. Dana, up front with a champagne flute, in the middle of some warm, rambling toast about love finding its way, let her eyes flick across the room and land on the two of us, and she got this look quick, bright, conspiratorial, finally gone in half a second. The look of someone watching a plan she'd helped build for years finally come true. She caught me catching it and looked away fast, and my stomach dropped, because that one glance told me this wasn't Claire acting alone on an impulse. This had accomplices. This had history. I turned to Claire and kept my voice under the noise of the room. "You planned all of this." She went completely still. "The song. The seats. This exact wine. The readings from the book I gave you, Claire. The book." And Dana just looked at us like she's been waiting years for this. "Did you plan the whole night? Did you get me invited here?" For a long moment she didn't answer, and I watched the performance slide off her face like a coat slipping off a chair. And underneath it was something I hadn't seen since the night she left me, Claire. Genuinely frightened, completely undefended, no wall left at all. "Not here," she said quietly. "Please, can we go outside? I'll tell you everything, I swear. Just not in the middle of a dance floor with my whole family watching." So we went out. Behind the barn there was a small old apple orchard, a few of the string lights looping out into the nearest trees before giving up to the dark, the music going muffled behind us. And we stood out there in the cool night air, two people who'd last stood this close 4 years ago on the worst night of my life. And I said, "Tell me. All of it." And she did. "I've been planning tonight for 2 years," she said. And she didn't say it the way you'd confess to something clever. She said it like a woman finally setting down a weight she'd carried much too far. "Since I found out how you were doing. And Ethan, before I explain any of the how, I have to tell you the true version of the night I left. Because you've spent 4 years walking around inside the wrong one. And I put you there. And I cannot live one more day knowing that. I didn't say a word. Couldn't have. I didn't leave. Because you weren't enough. I need you to hear that sentence before anything else. Because I know it's the story you built. I know you. I know you reached for the cruelest possible explanation the second I was gone, because you always reached for the cruelest one when it came to yourself." Her voice caught. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me. That was the problem. That was the entire problem, and I know how insane it sounds. That's not a reason," I said. "That's the opposite of one. My parents' marriage ended when I was 15. You knew that much. What you never knew is how. My mother had built her whole self around my father, no separate life, no floor of her own, and when he left, there was just nothing underneath her. She collapsed. For years. I watched a woman disappear because she'd made another person her entire foundation, and then he walked out the door. She was crying now, quietly, the way she almost never let herself. And I swore, at 15, standing in that wreckage, that I would never let myself need anybody the way she needed him. Always keep one wall up. Always keep an exit. Always hold enough of myself back that no one could ever pull the floor out from under me the way my dad pulled it out from under her. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. And then I met a man arguing with me about a fig tree. And 3 years later I woke up one ordinary morning and understood I'd done the exact thing I swore on my life I'd never do. I needed you. All the way. You'd become the floor. And I panicked, Ethan. I got so frightened of how much I loved you, how much I stood to lose, that I convinced myself the smart thing, the safe thing, was to end it while I still had a self to leave with. So I invented a lie about not being sure, and I broke both our hearts on purpose, and I ran. Not because you were too little, because you were so much that I couldn't control how much I needed you, and a terrified 15-year-old still living inside me would rather burn the whole thing down than risk becoming my mother. The orchard was dead quiet. Behind us, faintly, the band had started something slow. You ran, I said slowly, turning it over, feeling 4 years of a false story start to dissolve in my hands. You ran. It wasn't me. It was never me. It was never you. It was me. And it was fear. And it was the single worst decision I have ever made, and I've known it was a mistake since about 6 weeks after I made it. She pressed her hand to her mouth. And I would have called. God, I wanted to call you every day for 4 years. But every time I picked up the phone, I'd think he's moved on. He's better off without me. Why would I walk back into his life just to make my own guilt lighter? And then, 2 years ago, I ran into Marcus at a thing. And he told me how you were doing. He wasn't making a point, just talking. Worried about his friend. But he told me you'd gone quiet. That you never dated, that you worked constantly and slipped out of everything early and had let yourself get small. And he didn't know how to reach you. Her voice broke all the way through. And I knew, Ethan. Instantly. Because I knew you. You'd taken my fear and my cowardice and decided it was proof that you were unlovable, and you'd built a tiny gray life around a lie that was mine, not yours. You'd been paying, every single day for 4 years, for a wound I gave you and never once explained. And I could not keep living while that was true. So you built a wedding, I said. So I built a night. She let out something that was half a laugh and half a sob. I couldn't just call you, I was too scared, and honestly I'd forfeited the right to something that easy. But I thought, if I could just get you into a room, if I could get one single night where we weren't the exes everybody tiptoes around, where you had permission to lower your guard because the whole thing was pretend, where I could surround you with every good thing we ever were so you'd remember none of it had been a lie, then maybe I could get close enough to finally tell you the truth. So yes, I asked Dana to invite you, begged her. Actually, she's known the whole plan for 2 years. She's the only reason any of it came together. I made the DJ's playlist. I asked for our seats. I sent the wine ahead. I gave Dana's sister the book and marked the passage. I planned every single piece of it for 2 years because I am a coward who can only say the biggest things if I build the entire room around them first. You used to tease me about it, that I couldn't ever just let a good thing happen. You were right. I never could. So I built you one. I stood there under those apple trees and felt the whole 4-year story about myself, the small, careful, gray story of a man who simply wasn't enough to keep come apart in my hands. And I didn't yet know what to put in the empty space where it had been, and the not knowing made me almost dizzy. Why pretend? I asked. Why not just walk up to me and say it? Because if I'd walked up and said we need to talk about us, you'd have thrown your wall up so fast I'd never have reached you. I know you. You'd have gone polite and far away and found a reason to leave early, the way you do with everything now. The only way to reach the real you was to give you a reason to lower your guard that didn't feel like a risk. Pretend was the door. The only door I believed you'd actually walk through. She looked at me, wrecked and hoping at once. I didn't do it to trick you, Ethan. I did it because it was the only way I could think of to get close enough to say I'm sorry. And I was wrong. And I never once stopped. Not for a single day. And then she reached into the small bag she'd carried all night, took something out, and pressed it into my hand, and when I looked down at what it was, my throat closed completely. It was a leaf, a pressed, laminated Japanese maple leaf, deep stoplight red, gone brittle at the edges with age. The first tree I ever showed her. That first afternoon at the nursery, I'd held up a branch and told her this variety turned the exact color of a red traffic light in October, and she'd flat out refused to believe me. That first fall we were together, I'd driven her back out to see it, just to prove it, and she'd been so delighted she'd slipped a leaf into her coat pocket, and I had completely forgotten it ever happened. She hadn't. She'd kept it. For 7 years through the whole relationship, the move, the running, 4 years of silence, she had kept that one leaf pressed and protected, and carried it all the way to this wedding to put it back in my hand as proof she had never, not once, actually let go. I kept it the entire time, she whispered. Even when I left, especially when I left. I'd take it out and look at it and hate myself. Ethan, I don't expect you to do anything with any of this. I know 4 years is a long time. I know I might be years too late. And I know I've got no right to stand here and ask you for anything. But I could not let you spend one more day believing you were the one who wasn't enough, when the truth is you were so much more than enough that I got scared and threw away the best thing I will ever have. That's it. That's the whole reason for all of it. I just needed you to finally know. I looked down at the leaf in my open hand, 7 years old, red as a stoplight in October, and then up at the woman who'd spent 2 years quietly building an entire wedding into a confession because she loved me too much to make a phone call, and I did the only thing that made any sense. You're still doing it, I said, and my voice came out rough. She blinked. Doing what? Planning the good thing instead of just letting it happen. I closed my hand around the leaf. You built this whole impossible, beautiful night to tell me you love me. You could have just said it. Right here. No barn required. She let out a wet, startled laugh. I told you. I can't say the big ones without building the room first. Then let me say one that doesn't need a room. I stepped in close. And for the first time in 4 years, I didn't reach for the mean story about myself, I just reached for her. I never stopped either, Claire. I made my whole life small, because I decided that was the shape a man like me deserved. It wasn't. It was just grief with the lights turned down and the door locked. And I would rather have the real version of this, the terrifying, need somebody, no exits version. The one that made you run than one more single day of the safe gray nothing I built without you in it. I'm not scared of you needing me. I have been dying to be needed by you for 4 years. She came apart then, completely, and I pulled her in, and we stood in that orchard under the apple trees and the last reaching string of lights while the band played on inside the barn. And it wasn't pretend anymore, and both of us knew it, and neither of us bothered saying so, because we didn't have to. We didn't rush it after that night, and I want to be honest about that, because the movie version has us riding off from the wedding fixed and whole and glowing, and it wasn't like that. 4 years is real. Fear like hers doesn't evaporate because you finally said the true thing out loud in an orchard, and a man doesn't unshrink his entire life over a single weekend. We went slow. We actually dated, from the beginning, like new people, which was strange and lovely both at once, because we weren't new at all. She did the hard work on the 15-year-old still living inside her. The one who'd rather burn the house down than risk being left in it. She found somebody good to help her do it, and she let me see her doing it, which for a woman as private as Claire was the bravest thing of all. And I did my own work on the man who'd quietly decided he was easy to outgrow and started, a little at a time, letting my life get bigger again. I planted things on my own balcony for the first time in 4 years, unpacked the boxes, put furniture in the empty rooms, started staying late at things instead of slipping out early, because at last I had a reason to want to stay. The maple leaf lives in a frame on my desk now, next to a second one, because that first fall back together, we drove out to the old nursery, and the tree was still there, taller than before, and right on schedule. It had turned the exact color of a stoplight in October. Claire slipped a leaf into her coat pocket, and this time I watched her do it, and this time I didn't forget. A little over a year after the wedding, on a completely ordinary Saturday morning with nothing planned and no room built around it. Claire looked up from her coffee and said, "I have to tell you something, and I'm going to just say it, no barn, no plan." And I laughed and told her to go ahead. And she said she wanted to marry me, and that she needed to be the one to ask, because she'd been the one to leave, and she needed to be the one who came all the way back on purpose. And I said yes before my brain caught up with my mouth, the very same way I'd said yes to pretend we're still together, just for tonight, except this time there was nothing to pretend, and nowhere either of us was ever leaving. I spend my whole working life seeing the beautiful thing a bare patch of ground could become in 5 years, the light through a tree nobody's planted yet, the path worn by feet that haven't walked it. It took me until 36 to understand that the woman who once argued with me about a doomed fig tree had the very same gift, only she pointed hers at people instead of gardens. When she leaned over at that reception and whispered, "Pretend we're still together for one night," she was doing the exact thing she'd always done, seeing the beautiful thing the two of us could still become, and quietly, patiently building the room where it could finally grow. She planned it for years. And the best decision I have ever made was pulling that one loose thread, asking how in the world that DJ knew our song, and letting the whole careful, impossible, loving thing unravel right there in my hands into the truth.